He said that. Before I got just one quick, can you stand up? This guy knows how to dress in a nice color suit, don't he? I mean, like,
I said white shirt though.
I don't know if anybody noticed, but when I got to the office, like, oh my God. But anyway,
Look nice.
that's real nice, anyway.
Gilbert, is he a Longhorn? Because that's all orange. I see.
No, it's a different
Well.
color orange.
Okay.
The training went a little farther than I wanted. That's all. No, Mayor, Council, my objective today is to bring together all the department head staff presentation numbers and try to give it to you in one puzzle put together instead of the pieces here and there and there. Now, just keep in mind that you won't get a lot of it, but I got some numbers for you. August, when the budget's presented to y'all, y'all gonna have a lot of detail behind the summary, so then we can start crunching numbers and everything else. The presentation doesn't have the details about why this number. I will verbally tell you what the numbers mean and why. But the whole objective is kind of bring it together and kind of dissect it for you because you can understand different levels, and we can go through it in a minute. Okay. Oh, so yeah. As every CPA, we gotta qualify a couple of comments. Legal's real good about that. This is a work in progress. As you know, by the time, I might have some numbers shown tonight. The numbers might be tweaked a little bit. So in August, you get the final number. In addition to that, the numbers you've been seeing from the department head, those are about a month and a half ago numbers that they were sent out to them. I might have tweaked it by then. So I just want to keep that in mind if you're trying to go back. Well, they said, well, it might be off 1,000 there, but I'm keep fine-tuning it all the time.
But the programs they presented
The
are
programs are all
same.
still
I mean,
accurate, but
yeah,
it's just top to dollars.
The tweaking, especially with
Yeah.
payroll.
For example, TMRS rates, they came
Benefits.
in a couple of days ago. It's a little less and some other minor things. Anyway, we're planning to give you a balanced budget. In some situation, we might have recurring revenue exceeding recurring expenses. And I'll show you this in this presentation as well, under certain assumptions. Excuse me. I've been trying to get over a cold, so bear with me. We want to talk about tonight, I'm going to bring them all up here. I'm going to give you the whole perspective, the whole pie, what's included in the total expenses, meaning that include all the recurring expenses, include all the one-time expenses, include all the new service programs that we're going to continue from now on if council approves them. I want to talk about the one-time expenses. And I'm also going to talk about the revenues and how they match up with the recurring expenses as well. And we're going to end up, of course, talking about the projected ending fund balance and where we're at on the reserve side of it. We're proposing, as right now, about a $50.3 million budget overall, of which, let me get to mine because I cannot see that over there. Okay, let me emphasize one thing. You're going to see this key word, division, service division. What I mean by that is that, let's take public safety services. Public safety services encompass fire services, along with its components, fire services, police, and municipal court. Public works services encompass street, engineering, and traffic services. So public safety services has about $26.8 million, which represents about 53% of the budget. Public works services is $10.3 million, which is 21% of the budget. Park and recreation services is about close to $4 million, which is 8% of the budget. General administrative, what that is like you have support groups, I call them. You got legal department, city manager, finance, city secretary, public information, building services, custodial. Those are considered general administrative. I haven't caught them up there, sorry. That's about $3.3 million, or 7% of the budget. Development services, which consist of the planning, administration, GIS, inspection, code enforcement. That's $2.4 million, which is 5% of the budget. Library services, $2.3 million. It's 4% of the whole budget. And of course, you have your non-departmental, which doesn't fit in these other services, which is basically general insurance, Victoria Appraisal District fee, the county tax assessor collection fee, et cetera.
The zoo,
The zoo
zoo.
payment, it's in that department there. And moving on, I know this slide's small, but the whole basic concept of this slide, just to give you a quick comparison to the overall 14 versus overall 15 as an overall pie, we're increasing it by $1.29 million. Looking at it differently, which I like our tables, so you can see the comparison. One side, you got the service division, like I mentioned before. You got a column of 24 number, the 2015 year, and a column for increase and decrease and percentage of increase and decrease. And I will get into it in more detail in a couple of slides down the road, what makes up the increase and decrease. But I just wanted to show from last year to this year is an overall $2.3 million increase, but about 2.6% increase. And further dissecting it, this is where it gets nice. What caused the increase overall? Well, let's dissect it. First of all, as I mentioned before, you have a total budget of close to $49 million compared to a 2015 budget of $50.3 million, which is a total increase, as I mentioned before, is at $1.3 million, which is 2.6%. Let's take out our one-time expenses. Let's put them aside, because they're not reoccurring. They just kind of fuzz up the whole, it's not real clear, so let's put them aside. So let's subtract that out. So we get down to reoccurring expenses. In 2014, we had reoccurring expenses of $45 million, and proposed for 15, we have currently right now $47.6 million. Now you have a $2.5 million increase from last year on reoccurring. That's a 6% increase. To dissect a little bit more, let's take out the new programs that are being proposed for 2015. Now you're at the current service level that was provided last year and this year's. In other words, you're apples to apples now. So last year you had a $45.1 million budget. This year you have $45.147, which is a total increase of $47 million. In other words, it's a 0.1% increase. So what that really tells you, all those numbers, is that we're doing what we said we're going to do last year. In addition to that, when we were here back in August of 2013, we were talking about the fire station, staff, and everything else. We would like to set a tax rate to accommodate all those numbers in there. That's in there. That's in the 45-147. So the plan is working as we set out last year. The overall, we have an increase of $47,000. It's a combination of a lot of things, which can be, we have a carry-over payroll cost from last year, but hardly nothing. It's flat. Any question there? Do we understand that? I will make sure that's very important to understand. Okay, you got. I'm looking at you. I didn't see a pencil right in there. That's like there's plenty of pencils too.
Today.
All right. Let's move it on. Let's dissect that $47,000 increase a little further down by subdivisions. Public safety. Again, I will get into in a later slide all the increase. I'll go in more in details on the increase, but I just want to show what areas the $47,000 came from as a net. Public safety services increased by $709,000. Obviously, that's because of the 12 staff that was added for fire station number 6. Public works services decreased by $218,000. Park recreation service, $561,000. General administrative, $4,900, and so on, all the way down. That reflects the $47,000, which I showed in the previous slide. So I'm not going to spend too much time. I just wanted to show you by service division where the areas are. Now, what next slide? Sorry, somebody said something? Okay. Next slide. We'll talk about the actual increase, and that's where I'm going to start getting into the more of the meat and potato type of it. So the $4,700,000, what makes up that number? Well, personnel costs increased. Let me get to that slide. I'm behind. Increased by $300,000, which is 48% of that cost. And then you have capital outlay, which decreased by $288,000, which is, yes, sir. Oh, you give me that look. Okay.
Distraction over here.
All right. That's fine.
Keep going.
And then you have M&O increased by $34,000, which represents about 6%. The table below gives you more what's really happening. Basically, let's dive into it. On the public safety services, I broke it down, personnel, M&O, and capital. On personnel, increased by $520,000. Basically, that increase overall is mainly due to the 12 firefighters we have budgeted. The M&O, 242, is basically the insurance charges being IT and also the VES charges. We had a reduction, minor reduction, 34,000. Increase in capital outlay. So the overall is $789,000. Under Public Works, the reason for a decrease in personnel, because this proposal assumes that we're going to go to the street sweeping program. So there's 3 staff worth $112,000 total cost turnkey that comes out. So $108,000, majority of that is because of that, those 3 people. Let me move on to the big numbers. On the Public Works Service again, on their capital, mainly went down for $159,000 because we are budgeting less on construction of the streets. They just came in $159,000 less than last year. That's all that is. Park and Rec Services, the main reason is due to the to M&O is because we have transferred the mowing contract out of the Parks Department over into Street Department. That operation no longer is on the Parks, it now is under the Street Department. So the majority of that is that $444,000. And of course, you got some internal service charges adjustments there. And the $143,000 is we're doing less capital improvement, less infrastructure improvements and other structure other than buildings. Let's see, any other big ones I need to talk about? Library, the reason that went up, of course, as she mentioned, is internal services on that one. Non-departmental went down by $169,000. That one takes, I don't know if you remember, but in 2014, we modified our health plan. We came up with a new design, and there were some increases, and there were an increase to the city. At that time, we didn't know which cost centers, who's going to take what kind of plan and where that increase should be laying out. Instead of making a guess, I just put the whole estimate increase in non-departmental. Well, we're not going to have that in 2015 because in 2015 we allocate those increases where we think it's going to happen now. That's why the $169,000 shows a reduction. Does that make sense? The $63,000 increase is basically the outside insurance and the safety management overhead went up, and that's that $63,000. But if you take all that plus and minus, you're only a positive $47,000 increase over last year, apples to apples. Any questions? Okay. Let's talk about the new programs that we're proposing in the new budget. The total amount of the new programs is about $2.5 million. 3% pay performance for everybody, excluding the fire and PD side, certified folks. That's $452,000, which is 18% of the total cost. PD and fires, which we call the step-up program, costs about $364,000, which is about, 15%. Then we have the street maintenance program, which is $1 million, and that's the 41%. And did I say street sweeping? Or street maintenance? Okay. Okay. And the street sweeping program, which is $640 right now, we have in there at 26% of the total cost. And of course, on the bottom, I give you a layout on the table where those costs goes. And of course, as you can see, public safety takes $575,000 because of the step up, and of course the 3%. And then Public Works takes the majority of the remaining the rest. You got the $640,000 street sweeping program, the $1 million street maintenance program, and plus your PFP 3%. And that overall encompasses $2.5 million new program, i.e. new money. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's talk about the one-time expenses real briefly, because you're going to see them again in August. Fire Department, as Tanner's mentioned, we have an AC and heater replacement, $23,000, medical equipment for $61.6 thousand, excuse me. Computer hardware, $41,500, various kind of machinery at $66.7 thousand, and other equipment for $14,500. Police Department, as Jay just mentioned, we got that video system in there for $372,000, and other machinery and equipment for $118,000. Park and Rec, professional service $99,750, which encompassed the $50,000 that he mentioned about the Riverside Convention Center design. You got the GOAT program, about $49,000 in there. The track skid loaders and the piece of equipment for $73,000. And the other structure improvement consists of slightly over $325,000 for the walk trail he was talking about, $100,000 for playground and surface equipment for the Tracy Park, and $50,000 for the Grover's Bend parking lot. That's at 525.
I failed to ask anything about the rodeo arena in here going forward, or we're,
Road is not in there,
okay,
Yeah, we have no money in
okay.
nor the dog. Dog park.
Didn't ask about that.
Well, I just threw that out, FYI. The other one-time expenses, you got planning department, we talked about yesterday, upgrading the comprehensive plan for $175,000. Street department, the program that Mr. Lynshore has been talking about, the $2 million to the street maintenance program for fiscal year 2015, he needs about 1.990, not exactly 2, but he needs close to it, of which $1 million would come from a new base from the tax rate, and the $999,000 would come for, of course, the one-time money for the residential streets. Software maintenance replacement of traffic control system, $100.8 thousand. Library AC units, $17,000. Building service department door readers to walk inside the door, $15,000. And the non-departmental transfer to construction fund, what is that transfer? It's $12,662. As you remember, the city and the YMCA entered into a partnership agreement to come together and build the pool. Of course, the asset would belong to the YMCA. And it's going to cost us about $521,000 over 3 years. Well, the first year, I'm trying to take money that's here and there and put it together. And what I'm doing is that I need about $12,661 from general fund for the fiscal year 2015 new money. I have $126,000 right now sitting in the construction fund because Dudley Street project came in under and completed, so that money is general fund, is sitting there yet. I was going to allocate that to the YMCA's pool project. In addition to that, Andrew will be coming back sometime, I believe late July or August, where after we meet with the Sales Tax Corporation, and our request would be that we would like the Sales Tax Corporation pick up more of the costs on the fire station number 6. Right now, currently, the total budget for the fire station number 6 is $2.65 million. Of that, the Sales Tax Corporation currently is paying $335,000. So the bulk of the money is in general fund. So we would like them to maybe move up that more of a level playing there, help us out, so in order we can shift some money around, use $323,000 towards the pool project. Does that make sense? And of course, the last thing is we have $59,000 of bond money that was left over in various projects that we're going to shift it over to another project that currently is held by general fund and use that money there on the streets and relieve the general fund money to fund the total $521,000 that's needed for the first year allocation of the YMCA/pool. Any questions? Moving on. Let's talk about revenues. The 2015 proposed budget for the revenue side equates to about $47.8 million. Sales tax is budgeted at $17.0 million, which is about 35.6% of the total budget. Property tax, assuming with the tax rate we're going to propose, and we'll talk about that in a minute, assumes a $15.6 million. That's 32.7% of the total budget. Franchise taxes. That makes up $5.2 million of the budget, which is about 11%. Other financing sources, meaning transfers from the water fund, salvage sales, that equates to about $3.5 million, which is about 7.2 million percent of the budget. Ambulance charges. That represents about $1.78 million, which equates to 3.7% of the budget. Fire contract with the county, $1.5 million. That's 3.1% of the budget. Municipal court collection fees, fines, $1.2 million, which is about 2.5% of the budget. What's next? License and permits, $923,000, 1.9%. Other service charges, $338,000, 0.7%. And of course, you have your miscellaneous of $230,000, which is 0.5% of the budget. Looking at it a different way, before I get there, I'm going to focus strictly on property tax and sales taxes. That's the biggest bulk of the whole budget. And the other type of source of revenue are pretty constant, so a lot of it's contracts involvement too, and we control the fees on those, others' fees. But these other two items fluctuate a little bit. Property tax has less fluctuation. Of course, sales tax, is going to fluctuate much more.
That's the 1% sales tax.
Yes, sir.
Doesn't include the other half, so.
Looking at it differently, from a table perspective, I threw all the 2014 numbers, compare the 2015 numbers, and of course I'll give you a column for increase and decrease on the far right with the percentage. Real quick look at it, overall, comparing year to year, you got a $1.4 million increase in revenue. Of course, majority of that is because of the property tax revenue, mainly due to the assumptions I'm going to talk about, increase in the tax appraised values and the tax rate, which we'll talk about in a minute. Yes, sir. You got these eyes to just focus on people. I'm just trying to make sure I'm answering your questions. The $649,000, we'll talk about that in a minute too, because we have assumptions built in here that we assume the tax rate is going to drop a little, and I will have Andrew give you a little highlight on that. Before I move on this slide, any questions? Andrew?
Okay, we're going to look at an overview of the sales tax. This will start in 2006, and it'll take us out through where we kind of expect they'll be in 2015. Okay, we've got three different lines here. The blue line is indicating the original budget, the green line is the projected budget, and then the red line is the actual receipts. And I guess it's important to note that the green and the red, the projected and the actual, almost look like they're piggybacking each other. They're always going to stay pretty constant. And what's interesting is that there's always a delay between those and the original budget. If the original budget, take for example, is set most of the time in August of one year, and we're always looking at those projections based on trends. So you'll notice that discrepancy through the years. We've got a couple periods I want to highlight here, really starting in 2009 through 2011. This is what we're referring to as the recession period. Again, as you'll remember, the recession hit the local economy, receipts dropped off, below the budget at the time. And then really moving into what we call the Eagle Ford Shale and other economic development activities, that's when we were experiencing, a greater local economy. At times, there were several months in a row we were looking at 20+% increases. It's pretty important to note that substantial increase was spent, for the most part, on one-time expenditures. We didn't try to budget on that moving forward, so I think that's put us in a pretty good spot as of today. Since that period, you'll notice that the receipts have really begun to taper off a bit. We're really still trying to kind of figure out, I think this has a pointer on here. The green, yeah. And I'll just point on the left over here. We're trying to figure out if that's going to continue to kind of decline or if it's going to level out and even maybe start to go back up. So really, kind of looking at a recap of the current year, 2014, the original budget, catch up to my clicker here, the original budget of $17.68 million included an increase of 1% over fiscal year 2013 projected sales tax revenue. Current projections for the 2014 ending sales tax revenue we're sitting at $16.87 million, which would be 4.6% under the original budget, or 3.7% under last year's actual receipts. And to put that in dollar terms, that would come in under budget by about $818,000. Now, there's some couple different variables are built into this projection for the year of 16.87. As you know, we have 7 months of collections in the year, and really looking at that, there's been a little bit of a trend, I guess, over the last several months. We're anywhere from probably 3 to 4% under last year's actuals. So we're kind of using that, the 7 months that we have, and really we'll have 2 more receipts come in before you guys are actually delivered the budget document. So I think at this point we probably both feel pretty comfortable with that 17.87. Could fluctuate a little bit, but that's where we're looking for the current year. What are we proposing for the fiscal year 2015 budget? Proposed budget for sales tax revenue is, like Gilbert mentioned, $17.03 million, which includes an increase of 1% over that $16.87 million. And additionally, if you want to compare the 2015 proposed budget to the 2014 original budget, that's that decrease of $649,000 that ties back to Gilbert's last slide. That kind of recaps the sales tax as a whole. Any questions on sales tax? I think he's going to jump into the property tax at this point.
Thank you.
Bring us some good numbers.
Another receipt next week, I believe. Yeah, next week.
Before I jump in the next slide, I just want to repeat a couple of items. As in the previous slides, I just want to make sure, to me, I want to emphasize this because the rate we're going to propose is being proposed because in order to accomplish the new programs, this is what's needs to happen unless council decide to do otherwise and decide not to do some of the programs, or two, I had a second one, it just went out of my mind. I'll think about it. I'll tell you later. But getting to that is that just remember, if you compare last year to this year's on recurring services that we're currently providing right now, we've only had an increase of $47,000. So the rate I'm about to show you doesn't deal with that. It deals only 2 factors, now remember, of the new programs and what Andrew just went through. We're proposing an $800,000 decrease in sales tax. So if things were different right now and we had a better inflow on sales tax, the sales tax rate would be different. With that said, what we're looking at right now, I'm assuming about an 8% growth in net taxable appraised value. Let me talk about that. The paperwork I've been looking at and everything else from the appraisal district, that's been a couple of months ago. Originally, it was showing anywhere from 9.9 to 10% increase in appraisals. However, backed off that because there's a lot of protest that was going to happen, and there's going to be some adjustments. There's still got some adjustments on some mineral rights and everything else, and some exemptions still have to be go and cleaned up a little bit. So right now, I'm comfortable used 8%. Last year, just to give you a feedback on that part, is that it was at 9.5% originally, but it came in at 8%. So it seems to me might be the same scenario that happened last year, so that's why I'm using 8%. The second part of this is that on this number, I'm comfortable right now. We're going to be seeing about $109 million in new construction value coming on the road, meaning that these properties have never been taxed before. They're just brand new. They're coming on first time. That's a 25% increase over last year. I didn't expect that huge jump, but that's good news to see. Any revenue generated from that equates to about 41%. In other words, that I believe I mentioned $1.4 million from the sales tax. I mean, from the ad valorem. Well, you can consider 41% of that because the new appraisals coming in on new property. The tax rate that we are proposing is about 60.86 cents. The M&O, 35.80. That tax rate, 25.06, as we currently have planned to keep that tax rate steady. The ad valorem increase would be about $1.4 million, which would represent about 10% increase over last year. The tax rate that last year we had is 59.96, which overall we have a tax increase of 0.9 cents, less than a penny. With that said, with the assumption played in, with the 8%, we're looking at possible bond issue if council wants to go forward with a $7 million bond issue. As you recall, in our CIP work session, we were using a $4 million. We had plans set already for the $4 million, and so we have a possibility of getting another $3 million. Lynn Short, I asked him to give you a couple of examples of what the $3 million can go towards. And Lynn, can you do that right now? Sure. Great. Could be added to the CIP.
Sure. Our current CIP shows $4 million in it to rebuild the residential streets in Castle Hills and Castle Hills Royale. Those, that's a subdivision whose street ratings are less than 85, but whose utilities are also good enough to go ahead and build a street over. So with this additional $3 million, we're looking for similar subdivisions where you have streets less than 85, but good utilities. I would recommend moving north, Castle Hills north up from, it's not even in the CIP now, but it is in the residential street improvement plan. We would move it up because it is adjacent to Castle Hills and Castle Hills Royale, so you take care of that whole area. That's a little over $2 million. And then we could continue, we could move Hunselman Road from Anthony to 59. It's currently in the CIP for 2016. We could move it up. That's about $360,000. We could move North Street from Delmar to Anthony. That's currently in the CIP from 2016. We could move it up. That's another $360,000. And then we could move Nursery Road from 87 to the city limits up. I think it's in the CIP currently in 17 or 18, and we could move it up to 15. That's another $380,000. So that would then fill up your $3 million. And I looked real hard at what subdivisions had good utilities, but that were still, the overall cost was low enough to do for $3 million, and that's my best recommendation at this point.
Thank you, Lynn. Last comment about this slide is that management is proposing to move forward with a 7 assumption, get all the paperwork taken care of, do the rating agency calls, get everything in line. As you remember back last year, I'm gonna have a date for y'all to consider to pull the trigger on this or not, or back off completely. It's because once we have that trigger pull, I can't go back and try to get it back. So I'm gonna have those dates for you. So when the budget's presented to you in August, you're gonna have those dates set, and you're gonna have time to think about it. And there's gonna be a drop date there where I'll need a direction and approval from council. But in the meantime, we're still going to move forward with it to get everything taken care of. So the only thing we have to do at that time, come back to council and just get a yes or no to move forward. And then the following week, probably a Monday, we do a sale. Just want to let you, is that okay?
Just a quick reminder, a penny on the tax rate is going to bring in more money because of the new values. So that's why we can sell 7 million versus 4 million, and it stays within the same tax rate.
Yeah.
Just clarify.
The new values plus you do have the appraised values
Yeah.
going up. Yeah.
So,
With that 8% assumption, how much is a penny now?
151,
Whole penny?
a penny?
1 penny is worth
Yeah,
overall.
351.
No, it's a little higher than that.
Is it?
It's
Okay.
about 380, 380, 390.
Okay.
I had something. Okay. Moving on. Now this part gets interesting. Effective tax rate. That's where our eyes opened up. Right now, based on these assumptions and the new 8% appraised value increase and the $109,000 of new property coming online, we're looking at a tax rate, effective tax rate of 56.18. Keep in mind, it's an estimate. It's going to change. Of course, proposed tax rate is greater than the effective tax rate by 4.68 cents. The rollback rate per the city ordinance 20-26, as you recall, we limit ourselves 5% increase on the M&O side of it. So that calculation comes out to 59.40. However, if you compare that to the proposed tax rate, we're above that by 1.46 cents. What can happen there? It'll be up to the voters, where if somebody wants a petition, they gather a petition, sign a petition, and bring forth, and then they could possibly call an election. And if the election passes, it goes back to the rollback rate. Just FYI. But again, if you compare it to the state law calculation, the rollback calculation number on the state law is 60.38. If you compare that to the proposed tax rate, we're above that by 0.48 cents.
State law is 8%?
State law is 8%. And we went to the voters, it was a couple of years ago, whereby we asked voters to delete the 5% in our charter. That was approved by the citizens, but council decided to do another ordinance on it, just to, I'm looking for words there, calm things down, honor the spirit of it. Thank you very much on that's good choice. And that was done then. But one thing, keep in mind, whatever tax rate we go above the 59.96, current owners who have qualified, or new owners who will be qualifying for the frozen tax exemption, will not pay, repeat, will not pay any more taxes what they are paid in 2014. Their dollar values are frozen. So they will not get any effect on any type of rate increase if we decide to go that way. Just making that clear.
In what year did we adopt that? 98?
1996.
Okay. And the total value of that frozen property?
The total value of frozen property, based on last year's number, actually is about $874,000 of revenue that's came out of the coffers.
That we do not get.
We don't get that. And that brings up a good point. I noticed that the frozen values for the new appraised values have increased by 13%. So I expect that number to go up higher. Any questions? I decided to develop a little table here, so just to get more perspective. I threw in the home values, different ranges. I have a column for the current tax rate, proposed tax rate, the annual increase per homeowner, different values. Of course, the annual percentage was the same across the board. Mathematically, that's the way it is. And I just threw another column, what it would cost monthly to a homeowner due to that tax rate. If anybody's interested, the average household value per the Victoria County Appraisal District, I made sure I'm saying it's from them, it's about $137,000. That amounts about $12,000. I mean, $12 annually in tax increase. I took it a little further. I wanted to show you. I want to know too how the tax rate of the 60.86 that we're proposing, how's that money spent? Of course, allocating the various service divisions that we talked about earlier. So you have this money that comes into a coffer. 35.8% of that is for maintenance and operation for the general fund. The debt service, 25.06 goes to pay P&I, principal and interest. So I'm just going to focus on the M&O side. Public safety division, out of that 35.86, we spent about 19.65 cents on that division, which equates to about 54.9%. Public works services, they get about 6.97 cents, which is about 19.5%. Park and Recreation Service Division gets 2.47 cents, which equates to 6.9%. General Administration gets services get 2.54 cents, which is 7.1%. Development Services allocation is about 1.68 cents, which is about 4.7%. Library Service Division, about 1.72 cents. That's about 4.8% of the M&O tax rate. And of course, non-departmental, 0.77 cents, which is 2.2% of the total tax rate of 3580. Another way to look at that, I just do the pie side of it. Again, you got maintenance and operation, 3580, which is 59% of the total tax rate. Net tax rate, 2506, which is 41% of the tax rate. And of course, if you break it out by the service division, you get the same look, but in a pie chart. Sorry. Okay? I'm not going to spend any more time on that. I just want to give you two different looks at it.
This is property and sales tax, right?
No, that's just that dollar sign.
Yeah, this graphic here,
No, that's just strictly tax rate.
that's just property?
That's property. I got another slide coming up that shows sales tax, but that's just strictly, I'm just trying to give you, okay, if the tax rate is 6086, I'm paying that, where's that going? And I try to show you, well, from a tax rate perspective, this is how those pennies are allocated. Does that make sense? And I'll show you the dollar value to it in a minute. This is what I was talking about. On the left-hand side, I have the service division. I got one column. The column has recurring expenses of a total $47.6 million. That includes all the new program in there. Doesn't include, of course, the one-time expenses, but what we're proposing for this coming year. I have the tax rate, like I mentioned earlier in the previous graph. Then I got the property tax revenue that is associated to those pennies. Then you got your sales tax, and then other revenue they have allocated to each service division. Does that make sense? And you add it all up on the revenue side, it equates to the total 47,605 of the expense side. And your total tax is 35.80 cents. And I have a worksheet I can hand to anybody how those numbers came about. a simple math. Any questions?
It's a lot to take in.
Oh, I know,
You'll
I
have
know.
questions for me later, right?
I know. You got a couple of months to gather, absorb it, because we're going to have another discussion this in August. I know that when you get the final budget too as well. And then I guess I'm not speaking out of term, hopefully, just that I think we welcome conversation even after this. That anytime you want to meet and talk, I don't understand this slide. I don't know how you came up with these numbers. I'll be happy to sit down. We can go through it. So this is not going to be the first or the last time. Any fund balance, I'm projecting a beginning fund balance, which is going to be ending this year, starting next year, at $14 million. Recurring revenues, $47.8 million. Recurring expenses, I mentioned a while ago, is 47.6. I'm going to adjust those expenses, of course, because in my numbers, I assume a full cost of the PFP, $452,000. But a portion of that cost will not take place all in 115 because it depends on the employee's anniversary date. So there's a portion of that that will be carried over to 2016 that will affect cash flow wise. You got one-time expenses of 2.7. You're going to end up with a fund balance of about $11.7 million. And our reserve right now is at 11.7. We don't have any excess fund balance. We're keeping it at 23.5%. One of the main objectives of this budget was to try to encompass all the new programs without increasing anything above what we need on the tax side. Just to recap it, we're proposing a tax rate of 60.86, assuming a $7 million bond issue, continue with the current services we mentioned, adding new services, which is a street program, which consists of the maintenance program and the sweeping. And of course, we have the pay programs for the 3% PFP, Fire and PD Step-Up Plan program, which Cheryl's going to get into in a minute and talk further details about it. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my presentation. I know there's a lot of numbers. I know there's a lot of eyes looking up and down, but take it. Doors open. We can talk mathematically and everything else. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Can you go back to the proposed tax rate effect slide?
Not too far? Right
Down
there.
one. Down one more.
Is that it?
It's your chart.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The one that I can geek out on with all the numbers.
That?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only comment I really have about this is it's a little misleading because,
Okay.
and I don't mean that disrespectfully.
No, go ahead.
It makes into the assumption of already the 8% value increase that you're projecting, right? To come up with that tax rate of 0.6086. So when you compare the tax rate effect from year to year, your $150,000 home at the current tax rate isn't a $150,000 home anymore.
Are you, no. Well, all due respect, I don't, this slide was not interpreted that way. Because what you're referring to, you bringing in appraised values into play. This is not the purpose. This is taking $150,000, whatever, you got 150, today's row, whatever the row is now. That's all I'm doing. If you want to carry further, I would have to build a different little slide there to show you that. That was not the intent of this slide.
Okay.
So I was not misleading nobody with this slide. It's just saying, hey, I got 150, this is what it was. Now, to carry it a little further step, yes, I could have built a bigger table showing the values in fluctuation. That would show you a different picture. Yes, sir.
And I wasn't saying that was your intent.
No, I understand. I know where you're going with that.
Yeah, I'm just
But that
saying
was not the intent of this
Okay.
slide. It's just to give you a little flavor of that, what are you looking at as an increase? That's all it was.
Yeah, because it really makes it more with a increased appraisal and with increased tax rate and assuming an 8%,
Exactly.
You're gonna be more at $75
A
as
good example
opposed
is
to-
that you might have had to house at 140 last year, now it's 150. You got to accommodate the growth within that $10,000. I understand that.
Okay.
I just didn't want to show all that, but there is a factor there too to consider. But it's an 8% assumption. In dollar, I'm not saying it's immaterial, because everybody thinks that money's worthwhile, but the range, I was more concerned showing the gap. What am I looking at if I'm looking at $150,000? Well, I'm gonna pay about 13. Well, that's not the exact dollar. It's gonna be in that range, $13. It can be a little higher, it can be a little lower. It depends on what your appraisal came into. I was trying to show you the range.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to point out that it's
No,
a
no,
bigger impact
absolutely.
when you
That's
take
a good
into
point. Good
configuration-
point.
Take into account all the other.
That's a good point. But again, the slide was to give you more of a feeling what you're looking at. That's all it was. Any other questions?
I just wanted to, when we're talking about that addition, taking out some additional debt, and you mentioned some projects, Lynn, I'd like for us to go back and at least discuss the possibility of doing the overlay in the historic district that we've adjusted to go back to just the, what do you call it, the clear, not the seal? The seal coat versus asphalt, you know,
Well,
as another option on the drawing board.
that was because of the handicap.
I know it was gonna cost another $1 million. But I tell you, I've given a lot of thought to it. Again, that hard surface,
Well, I'm talking to Lynn, is that we can do that, but I do like to look at the life extent, I mean, how much life we have by doing that versus you issuing a $20 million a year debt. I didn't want to issue a 20-year, a 20-year
Oh, I see, for
maturity.
$1 million.
And I got a 5-year life value here. You're not using your money effectively.
Yeah,
That's-
I see.
I would like to visit with him to see what.
yeah, that's what I was saying,
plays
pros and
out.
cons. Just, I want to put that on that, if I could, that list. It's you're right. You're not going to issue 20-year debt on a very short life expectancy. Thank you.
That's all I have for this section. I got a couple of comments before Cheryl gets in, if I may. Ms. Garrett?
I want to go back and emphasize one thing.
Sure.
It's on your proposed property tax rate. I think it's the slide before this one.
More? This, next one?
Now, it's where we're talking about the increase, the ad valorem tax revenue increase is, there you go.
Okay.
Because I think that's important, that ad valorem tax increase at $1.4 million is what's paying for that new street program. We talked early on, when we brought that to you in December, we talked about it would probably take about 3 pennies on the tax rate to do that. You see the difference right there. So when citizens ask, what are you doing with that new revenue you're proposing there? It's your street program, and you can see the street program, and it pays a portion of that street sweeping program.
Right.
So that's where that money's going.
About half that 1.4 is new stuff.
41% of that is from the new appraised values.
Yesterday, when Jared was going over his total development plats and stuff, and you look back in 12, the numbers were high. That's it. That's where it's finally coming home. And then the numbers this year are really high so that bodes well for future growth in the tax base.
And I expect that correct. I expect that to go, because there's a time lag when they start building till it comes on the road.
About 2 years.
But I totally agree with what the city manager said. That 1.4 is new revenue, streets.
New revenue.
It's about streets. That's what the issue is about for me. You want streets or not?
Let me ask you this, so depending on, to whatever degree you roll that back, maybe to a penny, 2 pennies, a penny and a half, or split the difference between the effective tax rate and 3 cents. So would that all come out, you'd just be a matter of looking at what the additional street projects are and what would
That's all.
have to,
That's
how much
exactly
you'd
what
want to give,
you tell me.
and what would you want to cut?
City
That's
manager
the
will
bottom
tell you
line.
the same thing. Is that
So it's really simple.
it's very simple. It's like, here's your street maintenance, sweeping. I don't know if you want to touch the pay programs, but that's available. Choose. I give you a menu. There it is. We can cut that back to, if council wants to go effective tax rate, which that's what they want to do. There's a lot of cuts to do on those areas, and it can be done. But you tell us what. But from a management and my perspective, I think this is a sound plan to get everything encompassed at a .9 cents. But if council wants to come back and say, we'd like to keep it last year's rates, or whatever rate you like, management will have a decision for you that, an answer.
If you want to, if the majority of council wants to stay at the current tax rate, the 59.96, we would go to the street sweeping program and reduce it a little bit, and still leave the $1 million for the street.
That's correct.
Program in there, so.
This slide right here.
That's correct. Exactly right there, Mayor.
Yeah.
That's your decision points.
Existing, you know, everything else is the same as last year. Existing salaries, there's just nothing new, but this right here is the
Yep.
one.
And that's why I tried to key in earlier, that 47,000 represent the increase. And that's, if we have to do that again, that's not a problem. But everything else on the tax, besides the sales tax going down, it's because of that worksheet right there, those programs we have right there. It comes down that easy to it.
The staff has done a very good job of laying this out, what we need to do. And obviously, I've been pounding on the drum a long time. We've got maintenance staring us in the face that has been deferred. I'd like to address it a little earlier than later. The longer it's deferred, the more it costs us, whatever.
I was kind of going through this new programs list there. I identified 4 that to me kind of stand out. One, I don't know if the street sweeping, if that's the level of service that's needed. If we cut that in half or not, that would be 320,000. Trail improvements, that's a nice to have. It's not something that's a maintenance item for me, going through the park. That's another 350,000.
Let me interject something, Mr. Sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but you got to differentiate between reoccurring and one time. That trail is one-time money.
We still
So
gotta
if you're
make
going
up
to
next
pick
year.
up something to cut, it has to be reoccurring or proposed reoccurring.
All these, I think, were,
Well,
I
the
guess the
street-
street sweeping is not, it's going to be.
That's
M&O.
recurring. Street, you're right on the street.
You're right on the
sweeping.
street, but not the
Yeah.
trail.
Okay.
Because if you take it out of the revenue stream this year, you're stuck
just
next
sits there.
year.
That's all
Yeah,
I'm doing.
So,
What other things, Jeff? I meant,
The other couple are reoccurring, one times.
okay.
Yeah. We looked and looked at this and to find out, and I think that what Ms. Garrett mentioned a while ago, if you really want to go back to that 59, 80, 90, what she said is that's what needs to be done. We just do the sweep program. That brings it back to the normal tax rate.
Now, will you explain to me again, Mayor, on one times, what you're saying?
well, if you pull out an expense this year, and y'all help me with this, I know it was always difficult.
Yeah.
A reoccurring, it's like salaries. If you cut salaries, you don't have to worry about it again next year because it's in there every year. One time, you're back at square one the next year. I mean, it's a one-time expense. You still have to,
To look at it in another perspective, Mr. Bucknight.
whoever can do better than me.
Is that, that's, if you go to that slide that shows the one Mayor was talking about, $2.5 million, all that is reoccurring. So in order to match that up with another reoccurring, you would have to pick a reoccurring program because the tax revenue that's being generated is to fund reoccurring expenses. Especially there's a slide that I did that showed you all the costs, and I showed you all the reoccurring revenue that funds the total reoccurring expense. That's where the cuts have to come from,
It's kind
not
of
from the
like
one-time slide.
earlier on the sales tax
What-
discussion,
Go ahead.
sales tax had increased dramatically. It dropped. We didn't go and start paying people out of that sales tax because then all of a sudden, the next year, we'd be in trouble. We couldn't pay them because the money wasn't there.
Let me give you an example. if you don't-
That's a good, I guess.
Right. Let's say a lot of this one-time money is because we're going to end up with a year with some money not being used. Majority of this in payroll, and there's a overlay that came in under. That money is going to carry over to next year. Okay? If you go in the scenario that, well, let's use that money to subsidize a reoccurring expense, it worked for 1 year, but when you come back to the next year to do it again, you don't have that money anymore. It's gone. So what are you going to do then?
Okay. I
That's the
understand
whole
it.
logic of it. You would have it for 1 year, but when it comes to the next year to do another budget, you don't have that money, it's gone. In a perfect world, and say we spend every dollar, and staff don't do that, you don't have this on-time money won't be an issue. because you be setting a tax rate to accommodate everything every year. But of course, you got staff and vacancy and everything, you're gonna have a fluctuation comes in. But under that scenario, you can use it in 1 year, but 2 years down the road, you're gonna be a deficit. You gotta figure out a tax rate to come up with a new source of revenue to accommodate that cut.
Okay,
That make sense?
yes.
Okay. And
I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm,
You're through?
I got a few more comments on some other topics. I'll wrap that up real quick. I'm just going to hand out, give you a quick explanation what it is. We can talk about it later, and then Cheryl's going to jump in and talk about payroll real quick.
And that's kind of what we were talking about. Was council about ready? I know you've got a handout to show what Councilman Balknight was asking last night.
Well, I'll show everybody,
Water
yeah.
rate, yeah, but
Sure.
that question's, you've got a handout for
Yeah.
that. And then we also, we were talking about Cheryl, do we want to carry over Cheryl's conversation to June 17th at the next council meeting? And if council was kind of getting, I know there's a few that would like to leave early to get to the East
okay.
baseball game in Austin, so.
Okay. I
So
got you.
it's council's, we don't mind we can postpone the pay program. It is funded in these numbers at 3%, Ms. Solis, for a PFP, and then the STEP program for the fire and police is funded in here, so 3%. But that's,
My question was, if you want to conclude your comments, council, it's up to y'all if y'all want to stop after that or continue. We can do either one.
Okay, let me wrap it up, and then y'all can make a decision on that, if you want to go forward. Andrew's going to hand out 2 different worksheets. And what I want to talk about is a small worksheet first, real quick. I'm not going to go into detail. Water? Yeah, the water. And I just want to give a quick explanation of the conversation about yesterday, just to have things cleared up and how to look at things. Not to say that you approve the rates, but just how to think about it. I'll wait till the handout's out first.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. One of the things I want to talk about, I know it's very confusing. You get numbers, so well, where these numbers come from, and I respect that because I'm the same way. I like to know from A to Z, how do we go in a straight order fashion, how do you go through that number? And it drives me crazy when I don't know that. So I know where certain people are coming from. But what I wanted to do is show you, on that, going back to the conversation last night we had about debt, reoccurring, all that, taking it out, I wanted to show it on paper. On the first worksheet, what I did here,
It's this one, right?
right, it's called Analysis of Water Wastewater Fund Reoccurring Maintenance and Operation, Revenue Expense. What I wanted to do, I wanted to show council, forget about your one-time expenses, forget about debt, throw that out, and let's focus strictly on M&O side. And what I did here, I threw the budget for 15 proposed, the original for 14. Then I came down the bottom, I subtract the one-time expenses for both years. I took out the old debt, I call it the old debt service, the one before the new debt we just issued. And then I subtract out the new debt, principal and interest, that we just issued. And I want to show you, you have a total reoccurring maintenance and operation expense of 15.7 versus last year of 15.3. which is a difference of $500,000, okay? I go back to the revenue side and do the same concept. I got my total revenues for 15 at 25.8, original at 24.7. I subtract out the proposed rate increase. Just take it out. Forget about it. Go back. Now I got to subtract out the debt revenue that we collect every time to go to debt. Every time we set a rate for the paid debt, we put it on the base, dollar for dollar. Dollar comes in, dollar goes out. It doesn't stay here. Because my priority on that is to make sure I have enough money coming in that it's going to go strictly to debt. 69.93% of the base rate goes to debt. I recall in the presentation I did to y'all back in December, all the debt and all that, it was in there too. I'll be happy to show that to you again. Then I go out, I subtract out the old debt revenue that I collected of $8 million, and last year was close to $8 million. Then I subtract, in 2015, the money is about $1.5 million of money that we've been collecting since 2012. As you recall, in 2012, we passed these water and sewer rates to accommodate the new water treatment plant. All these years, we had the, I won't call it luxury, but we used that money every year on one-time expenses. If you look at 14, that money sits there. There's no debt associated. But in 15, it's there. I take that out. So you come down to recurring M&O revenues of 15.2. In 2014, you have 15.23. So overall, when you compare the revenues to the expense on 2015, you have a deficit of slightly over $500,000. Thank you. So we can have a discussion about the rates later or what, but I just want to give you the concept, how staff is coming out with that deficit. And we can explain later in August about, again, what makes up that deficit.
And we'll also bring back what, if we don't adopt the rate or if we reduce it in half, what's not going to get done. So y'all will have a clear picture of.
Well, I just want to, that's correct. I just want to emphasize too, we're bound by some bond covenant that we have to generate so much revenue. Could we go down? But the risk is that $500,000, well, you got $500,000 showing there, Gil, next. Well, that's true. But to me, I see that not being available to use where I want. That's my fluctuation for any weather patterns that doesn't come in. My revenues come in under. So when I do those tests, I don't fail them. I still have the money coming in. So I might have, budgetary-wise, it might show a $500,000. By the end of the year, guess what? It was only $200,000. So that's my cushion I was trying to emphasize. Could we go down? Sure. But the risk goes up higher. I just want to emphasize that. I want to get on record just in case there's any court issue. Anyway. The second page behind that, I just did the same thing, but just leave everything out, just take out the one time and just squeeze it out, and it comes out to the same way. I just wanted to show you that. Does that make sense? We can talk further about it, but it was just concept I wanted to try and get across. The numbers, it's always open for discussion. The last page that you sent that, the last page that handed out, I'm not going to talk about in detail, but I did this real quick today. I want to show you all the internal service charges that's allocated out. I got 15 on top. I got the 14-year on bottom. You got workman's comp charges, purchasing charges, vehicle, the capital that they buy, they sent the money to the VES. You got VES repairs, in other words, it's money that sits there for any repairs on the vehicle itself. You got VES overhead, payroll, everything else, maintenance. VES fleet service, what that is the contract. On an annual basis, it goes up by a percentage. Communication overhead, communication radio maintenance that we've been talking about, JJ and Turner. If you look down on top, that's a new allocation for the radio maintenance. If you look down the bottom in 2014, it was all in general fund, basically in fire and PD. IT charges, if you look at that, if you look at overall, it went down $816,000, but mainly because that one-time expense of last year of that software we buying. So you take that out, it nets out to zero. So you can see some departments go up or down, but overall, as a component unit cost-wise, overall is zero. Purchasing print shop, safety management overhead went up. Insurance, outside insurance charges went up. I just want to give you this so you can have a more perspective, because it's hard. I understand if I was sitting up there looking at internal charges, what exactly you're talking about. You see all these numbers, but you don't have nothing to deal with or understand where it's coming from. I just want to give you something so you can relate to when we talk about internal charges. We will talk about it further during the budget, of course, but I just want you to have something there. That's it. Now you can make the decision.
Perfectly fine with me.
It's been a long
How do you
afternoon.
guys feel? You want to, Martha, Johnny doesn't mind waiting to the 17th?
Not at all.
Any consensus at all?
Fine with me.
I don't have to say.
Let's do it then. You don't mind? Appreciate that. Mr. Halpasky, all right with that? Ms. Solis?
That's fine.
Okay. It's a lot of information, thank you. And I just want to emphasize, it's very preliminary, no decisions. Yeah, we've made no decisions to do anything, increase anything, decrease anything whatsoever. It's good information. Lots of time to talk and study it and for things to change. You never know, and sales tax could increase. I know. Okay, anything else, staff?
No, I just want to compliment the department heads. They spend a lot of time doing these budgets. They do a really good job. They recognize that we're trying to be very frugal with tax dollars, and I think you saw some of that over the last 2 days with their numbers that they came in. And everybody knew going in, the street maintenance program was a priority for council, and we made it a priority in the budget. So they've done a good job.
Thank you.
We'll bring back Cheryl and on the pay program on the 17th or 19th or whatever the Tuesday is.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, David.
Take care.